What's up, everybody? My name is Del. This is Del on Movies. Thanks for hanging out with me. And if you've been here before, thanks for hanging out with me again. And we are doing yet another community challenge. This one comes from Tim Talks Talkies. And if you remember, a few months back, he did a challenge where we did our top 25 movies of the 90s. And at that time, I was like, man, there's so many great movies of the 90s. It was so hard to narrow this down to 25. Well, he took us a decade further back. He said, let's do the top 25 of the 80s. And I'm having the same issue. So many great movies that I had. It was a struggle to narrow it down to 25. And I'm going to give it my best go. This is my list today. If I made this video tomorrow, it probably a different 25, or at least in a different order with some different movies thrown in there. Same thing if I make it the day after that. So I'm going with what is my top 25 today. And it's going to surprise some of you, because some of the movies that I thought were really high were really low when you start pitting them one against another, and you go, oh man, this one I would like better than that one. So movies I thought were maybe in my top 5 or 10 are either barely in the top 25 or out of the top 25. So let's get started to see what I'm talking about. And we're going to start right away with number 25. It's a movie that you've heard me talk about before as one of my favorite horror movies of all time when I did that list for Tim. And this one, you can see it right off the top here. It is the original Friday the 13th. And it is a movie. Let me get a better shot of that one. There we go. So it is a movie that I grew up with. It was one of my Rad 9 for them. And it's a fantastic horror movie, and I get it that has its detractors out there, but for me, this was one that was really one of my gateways into horror, so I just always will have love for that movie. Number 25 for me of the 80s. Number 24 is a movie a lot of you are going to have in your top 5, I'm sure, and that movie is the original Die Hard. This is the Die Hard collection steelbook, and it's the original Die Hard, and it is, some people call it the perfect action movie. It is a great action movie, great Christmas movie. For all of you who don't think so, I don't know what the problem is. It's a Christmas movie, but Die Hard gets my number 24 spot. And yippee-ki-yay, man, I'm not going to say the rest right now. Number 23 is a movie that is a spoof. It's the first spoof on my list of a few. We've got a few more spoofs in here, and this one is one that doesn't get as much play as the others as far as you guys goes. It's not as talked about as much, and this one is I'm Gonna Get You Sucka, and I need to upgrade this to blue. And as you can see, it's a Blockbuster rental. I bought this as a used video. So this movie, though, you guys, I saw this movie not long after it came out on DVD. I did not get to the theaters to see it. I was a big Wayans Brothers fan from Living Color, and I know Keenen Ivory Wayans was the driving force behind this. And from In Living Color, I was a pretty big fan of theirs by the time I saw this. And it was before Black Dynamite, which is another one, a blaxploitation spoof. This tackled that genre and did it very, very well. We've got lots of things like the visible stunt person, the man that's a stunt person for a woman doing lots of backflips, and we get the blaxploitation horror jokes we get the character that kind of just transforms instantly. And then of course the favorite of everybody who's seen this one of the favorites I should say, is the woman who takes a gentleman home. She takes Keenen Ivory Wayans home and is not what she appears to be. If you know about her losing a leg and hair, it's hilarious. And it was also probably the first movie I saw Chris Rock in. Also, he has a brief part that's also very, very funny. One Rib, if you know anything about that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So if you know, you know, as they say these days. So that was 23. Next is number 22. Another movie I was like, man, this has got to be top 10. So this has got to be top 10, and it does not appear to be. It's not today, and it's from this box set. I'm gonna pick up the whole box set. I'm talking about the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And guys, I'm only picking this up because I love showing this off and then giving my little bit of a rant. I'm holding on to it at least until I get a legit new set of good, at least Blu-ray, but maybe 4K. Fingers crossed. If the Friday the 13th franchise can come out of Right's hell and get a whole box set, then it can happen for Nightmare on Elm Street. So I got my hopes up. The movie itself, I went to the theater to see this when it came out. So I was about 13 years old. And my mom, you may have heard me say before, she was kind of lax on what she let us watch. So yeah, she took us to see this movie, and I'm the oldest of my siblings. So I had a sister at the time. My brother at the time rather was 8. My sister was 7, and then my youngest brother was 4. And we're all there watching Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'll not tell all his business, but my youngest brother. But it was a fun time when we got home that night for sure, and that will always be a family memory. As far as the movie, Freddy's a creature that, how do you combat something that, you're asleep? You have to go to sleep. You can't just not sleep. So that's what makes Freddy a great character and a really good movie. Going down to number 21, another movie you're like, man, this has got to be right up there for the very, very best, and or my very, very favorite, and it is in my top 25, just not as high as I would have thought, because you guys, you've seen myself and other blue tubers. It's always, no, this movie's in my top 5, this movie's in my top 10, this movie's in my top 20, and you keep saying that enough and you have 100 movies in your top 10. Well, that's kind of the case here. I had 100 movies in my top 10 until I started actually listing them out. And this is Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is not one of the fancy smancy 4Ks that just came out. This is a Blu-ray set that came out a few years back, so I haven't upgraded that. But hey, I still love the movie. Been a little while since I watched it, so it's about time to watch it. Probably before I go see the new one, Dial of Destiny. But this one was a family, not a family, a block trip. We used to have block associations when I was growing up in New York, and the block association decided to take us to see Raiders of the Lost Ark when it came out, and we just had a blast. And I'm going to go more into that in another video, because I've definitely got an idea for a video for that. Stay tuned. Anyway, next movie, number 20. Let me recount here, 25. Yes, number 20, guys, is a movie I saw this movie way too young. It is Raging Bull, Martin Scorsese. I'm pretty sure this was my first Scorsese movie, and I saw it. It used to play on HBO all the time, and my uncle was he was an amateur boxer back in the day, and so here's this boxing movie, and I'm just hanging out with him one night, and he throws it on. He had him and his friends were just watching movies, and he threw this on, and I'm just sitting there, and I was blown away by, one, the amount of F words in in the movie, but then the story kind of got me. Even though I was kind of young, I kind of still was absorbed in the story of Jake LaMotta. But as I watched it when I got older, you can really see how much of a masterpiece it is. So Raging Bull goes number 20 for me. Number 19, man, I'm telling you, all these movies I saw way too young. This is a movie I saw because I was spending the night at one of my best friend's house. And, we stayed up late watching HBO, or I'm pretty sure it was HBO at his house. And this movie came on, and we were kind of looking for a scary movie. We didn't know what we were getting into. And the movie that was coming on was Videodrome, and get a better shot of that. So Videodrome is a movie that at the time I liked it because it was weird. You got a lot of weird things going on, and of course there was a pretty good deal of nudity in the movie also, which appeals to a 13-year-old, 12, 13-year-old. But it was definitely weird, which was what I remembered more even in the years before I saw it again as an adult. When I saw it again as an adult, it was like, wow, this is really, really innovative stuff and still relevant, actually. And I'm not the biggest Cronenberg fan, but for me, this is his best movie. And I was just blown away when I revisited it as an adult. If you don't know the story, basically, we got James Wood as the lead character, and he works at this TV station that's losing money, and they're looking for the next big thing, and they come across these tapes that look like snuff tapes, and the channel he works for is kind of like a exploitative kind of channel where they show that kind of stuff. And he goes all in on it, but the problem is, of course, the tapes are influencing people to do crazy things, and crazy things start happening once you start watching them. So Videodrome is it's a wild ride. If you've never seen it, go ahead and check out Videodrome. Number 18 for me is going to be a movie in this set, and this is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. So not the original, but the Christmas Vacation. And I do love the original, and I love European Vacation, but Christmas Vacation is my favorite. And I saw this in theaters also. I was actually in the Army by that time, and they used to have movies on base. They had a movie theater on base, and Friday nights every now and again, me and my two best buddies would go. And one night we just went and saw Christmas Vacation. It was only one theater. It wasn't a multiplex or anything, so whatever was showing was what you saw. And I just cracked up from beginning to end, and I've watched it, I don't know, a dozen times since, and it is just easily one of my favorite Christmas movies of all time. Another list I did for Tim Talks Talkies, my top 25 Christmas movies of all time. Tim just keeps the challenges coming. I love it. Next is a movie that I definitely was like, okay, this is going to be like number 5, number 6. And it probably could be, but watching it over, you're seeing it so many times, it's kind of dropped it down because you start to notice some of the flaws with it. But nostalgia factor is through the roof. And that movie is 1989's Batman. And yeah, for a whole year, again, I grew up in New York, so a whole year before this movie came out, everywhere you look, just the poster with the bat symbol was just somewhere. Everywhere you look. You walk down the street, it was there. You drove on the highway, it was on a billboard. You walked in the subway, there were like 20 posters between, the top of the stairs when you were walking down, or up if you were riding on the elevated train, and along the platform there was Batman posters. So I saw this every day for a year. I was already a Batman fan, and it was just guaranteed that I was gonna go ahead and see this movie. So I did see it in theaters. A few celebrities were in the theater with me, and yeah, you know what, I'm gonna make a series on my theater experiences, but this is definitely one of those best theater experiences. But the movie, most of you have seen this movie. It's just a ton of fun, and Jack Nicholson really steals the show. Next movie is another spoof, and this one is barely made it into the 80s, Airplane. So Airplane, it is a spoof of another movie, and it's just hilarious, and the jokes just one after the other, and this really sparked my love for that type of comedy, because it's as dumb as it seems. It's really, really smart, and that's a hard thing to pull off. So, and I think that's where a lot of modern spoofs struggle. They're getting better over the last few years than they were like during the mid 2000s. But yeah, it seems really dumb, and a lot of dumb things happen, but it's really smart, and I really kind of gravitate towards that kind of humor. And yeah, it's a lot of stuff that you probably couldn't say or do today, but I'm glad that they did it. The next movie on the list is another one I saw in theaters back when it came out. Again, mom took me to see this one. I was probably about 16, so this was probably cool to see, but it was not what we were expecting. We saw the trailer, and it looked like a superhero movie, which it is kind of. And we took our cousin. I have a cousin who was about 10, 12 years older than me, so he was in his late 20s, maybe 30 when this came out, and he decided to tag along and come with us, come with the family, hang out with us. And he was reluctant about seeing it because he thought it was a kiddie flick from the trailers that he saw. It looked like, like a little, popcorn flick. And we got there, and it is one of the most violent movies we had seen up to that point. And even him, and he was a horror fan. He was a horror fanatic. And so he was just all in. And you don't even know what movie I'm talking about yet. But I'm talking about the one where they take a police officer who's been killed and turn him into RoboCop. And I'm talking about the original. There are all 3 movies in this set. Yeah, right at the beginning, when Murphy gets killed, his hands blown off and it's all kind of blood and gore and it's extremely well done. Still holds up today. If you watch the movie, we were all in on this one, so I've got nothing but love for RoboCop. Next is another spoof, and I believe this one is going to be the highest ranking of the spoofs that I have. And yeah, it's the highest ranking of the spoofs that I have. And this one is The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad. Again, lots and lots of dumb things happen, but it's really smart movie. It's really smart how they do it. It takes a lot to make something seem dumb even though it's smart. It takes a lot to do that. Naked Gun, Airplane, they do it very well. And Leslie Nielsen is outstanding. I did not go to theaters to see this one. I saw this late night cable one night. Not even late night, actually. I might have saw this in the afternoon. It just came on and just laughed and laughed and laughed, even though I was a teenager and some of the jokes were going over my head. But I still had a great time watching it. I must have watched it, 15, 20 times over the course of a summer, one year. And even now when I put it on, I still crack up. Another movie the next movie is a movie I did go to theaters to see, and it was me and my best friend went. We might have had our younger brothers with us, and they were probably too young to see the movie, but hey, we wanted to see it because we didn't get movies like this that often in the 80s, and this was a movie with a almost entirely black cast, and it is called A Soldier Story. It will go on to be nominated for a few Academy Awards, and including Adolph Caesar, I believe is his name. He might have won Best Supporting. I have to double check that. And of course, this is Howard T. Rollins on the front. Some of you may know him from the TV show In the Heat of the Night, not the movie. He was the lead character in the TV show In the Heat of the Night. And this is a murder mystery during World War II on an army base. A black soldier has been killed, and if you're not familiar with army history or military history, up until World War II, well, pretty much throughout World War II, up to that time, soldiers were segregated, and black soldiers, they had their own units and their own officers, and they were all automatically, of course, below the white their white counterparts, and they were not allowed. Black soldiers were not allowed to even see combat. It was one of those deals where they thought that black soldiers didn't have the intestinal fortitude to go to war, which is interesting because now that is completely the opposite. Whereas you on the front lines, it is largely people of color. But this story really has nothing to do with that. It's really just a murder mystery that's happening, and we were enthralled with it when it came out. We were watching, we were all in, and we just were riveted by what was happening on the screen. And of course, our love for it was validated with all those Oscar nominations that I talked about. And it was also one of the first times that I got to see Mr. Denzel Washington in a movie. Might have been the first movie I saw Denzel in, because I didn't see his earlier movies. He had a couple of earlier movies in this that I didn't see until later. So I think this is the very first time I saw him on the big screen. I had seen him in St. Elsewhere on the TV show he was in. And the next movie is another one. I mean, I just keep saying that over and over and over. It's like, man, all these movies that I would think are top five, and I know this movie, a lot of you are gonna have it number one, and I'm not, but I probably very well could. This is number 12. I have been keeping count, guys, and yes, I'm gonna have if I haven't mentioned it or you haven't seen it, yeah, there's a count. There are numbers coming up somewhere. It is the first movie in this franchise, the Terminator franchise, and I love this box set. I have, just because of this, and nope, I didn't get all the fancy smancy 4Ks for the Terminators or T2. I'm talking about this movie over here, the first one. Of course, the second one didn't come out till the 90s. and I didn't see this one probably until just before seeing T2. So I know it came out in 84, and T2 I think came out in 90 or 91. And I didn't watch this probably until 88, 89, maybe even, yeah, maybe even 90. But I was in love with this movie. Just Arnold in a role that was perfectly suited for his abilities at the time. Today, he's not an Oscar caliber actor, but he is much better than he was then. And this role was so perfect for him because all he had to do was look menacing, and a man that big can do that pretty easily. But he outperformed even that. And the whole story, it plays like a slasher flick, like a horror flick. So I really enjoyed the Terminator. Some days I like it better than T2, to be quite honest with you. Some days I don't. Some days they go back and forth, and because there is that good. Yes, it's a much lower budget. Effects are not nearly as good as in T2. I get it, but the story is so good that it rivals T2 for me. And number 11 is a movie, another one I did go to theaters to see, and this one is The Empire Strikes Back. I had a recent video where I talked about this movie, and it is one where, yeah, I really learned that the good guy doesn't always win, and that's not the easiest thing to pick up on when you're 9. So this when this movie came out, that's the first part. When you everything you've seen on TV and in movies is tell you that the good guys win automatically. And at 9, it it, it was particularly powerful because you don't necessarily know that there's going to be another part. And it's not like today where, it's advertised months in advance that there's going to be another part. And if it was back then, I wasn't reading movie magazines at 9 years old. I know some of you might have been. I wasn't. And I just kind of knew what was coming out. I had seen Star Wars, or New Hope, as you guys call it. Younger folks call it. Here, I'm sounding really old. But I watched it, and yeah, the good guys not winning just blew me away. And then of course, it is the most famous twist in cinematic history, and I was sitting in the theater for it, so I'll always have that. And that's gonna bring us into my top 10, and we're gonna start my top 10 with Full Metal Jacket. So I actually saw this movie for the first time uh, maybe a month or less than a month probably before I actually left for basic training for the Army. So it was the first opening, the first part of the movie, the first half of it where they're in boot camp was frightening at the time. At the time, it was like, oh my God, is this what's gonna happen? But it's a movie, so you got, well, it can't be that bad, and you go. Um, the and then the second half of the movie, I was like a lot of people. I didn't really like the second half as much, and then I rewatched it years later as an adult. What struck me is that the second part, it complements the first part really well, and it is exceptionally well done. The problem is that the first part of the movie is so good that the second half could never have lived up to it. At least that's my opinion on that. And I think the second half is really good, and that's my favorite war movie of all time. Um, it has so much to say beyond what a lot of war movies do. Yes, if you dig into it, it's really an anti-war movie, and the my next favorite war movie is actually the complete opposite of that. If you saw my 90s video, Saving Private Ryan was on that, and it's not an anti-war movie. It's a glorification of Americana, and that's fine. But I gravitate towards Full Metal Jacket because it has so much more to say, and that's my number 10. Number 9 is going to be a one of my favorite gangster movies of all time is going to be Scarface, Al Pacino, and iconic performance. And I came across this one on VHS. One day, my mom had it. She had rented it, and in my house back then, we only had one VCR, and it was in her room. So unless I was like invited into the room to watch a movie with her, I couldn't really watch a movie. But what I would do a lot of times is when she wasn't home, because I was a latchkey kid, which means I went to school without by myself. I came home by myself. Nobody was home because she was working, and a lot of times she would work on weekends. So when she wasn't home and I wanted to watch a movie, I'd just go in her room and watch a movie. All of us did. I mean, she knew it, and she was fine with that. So it wasn't one of those where I'm being sneaky kind of deals. Scarface was one of those she had on a videotape. At first she rented it, and then at some point someone taped it off of cable, and that's the version that I saw. And I must have watched that 10, 15 times and just fell in love with every part of that movie. So Scarface is number 9. Number 8 is actually another movie I watched just like that. Somebody taped it off cable, and I saw it, really enjoyed it. And over the years, I've seen it a lot, and it's about to be, or well, it's been remade. The remake is about to come out in a few months, and that movie is The Color Purple. And I gotta show off this here, like the nice little digibook. Let's get it there. We got all these fantastic pictures in there, and I actually need to read this. I haven't read this, guys. Sorry, but I'm not gonna go through every page. But we get the disc back here. But yeah, so I saw this movie on her TV in her room while she wasn't home, and really enjoyed it. And in the years after that, we watched it together probably a couple times. And I know I watched it with my sister. She loves this movie, and I'm really looking forward to see what happens with the musical, because with the remake, which is a musical, it was after the movie ran its course. It was nominated for a bunch of Oscars, should have won at least a few of them. It was made into a Broadway musical, and then it ran forever and ever and ever. And now, I should say not then, but now it's coming out as a movie musical. So I'm really curious to see what happens with that. Number 7 is going to be Stand By Me. And just like The Color Purple, just like Scarface, I actually saw this movie in Mom's room when she wasn't home one day. And this is a movie, it you can relate to it. If you're an 80s kid, you can absolutely, positively, 100% relate to an 80s or 70s kid, because you spent so much time away from home without your parents. 2023, that's not the case. Most kids do not spend a lot of time, at least most kids that I know, don't spend a lot of time away from their parents when they're outdoors. We did. It was, you left the house in the morning, and then you came back at night, and they didn't know where you were half the time, or they knew, or at least you told them something, but they might not have really known where you were. They didn't have any way to contact you. There were no cell phones, and you were just out on whatever kind of adventure you got into that day. And for these guys, it was trying to go see a dead body. And so me and my friends, we never went to see a dead body, but I could really relate. The next movie is number 6, and I actually figured out that I was pretty on with the count. At least I think. I'm gonna find out when I'm editing, guys. But the number 6 is a movie Mom went and took us to see. Took me, and I'm not sure why. I don't know if I asked to see this movie, or she just wanted to see this movie, or I'm not sure why. But we wound up in the theater sitting there to watch The Untouchables, and it blew me away immediately. This was, of course, the story of Elliot Ness and his band of untouchables trying to capture Al Capone. Robert De Niro as Capone was amazing, and I remember watching news programs back then, or Inside Hollywood, or whatever the show was that I watched back then, and I'm talking about how much weight De Niro gained to play the role. And mind you, I was only familiar with De Niro from Raging Bull at the time, which he was he was smaller at first and then bigger at the end, so I knew he could do that. But the Untouchables was just one of those gateway movies into gangster or mafia movies. Um, Sean Connery. That was really the only time I had seen Sean Connery not playing James Bond, because I'd seen a bunch of James Bond movies on TV, but I'd never seen him in anything else until The Untouchables, and he was just great in that too. And I was just hooked, right from the beginning when they got that big overhead shot of Capone and they're telling you about what's happening in Chicago. So that is one of my favorite crime movies of all time. Again, next movie is number five, and it is a movie I also went to see, and I know that I asked mom to take me to see this one because we, in my house, for one of those shows that one of the non-black shows we watched. We didn't watch a ton, to be quite honest with you. I mean, we watched it. Well, I shouldn't say that. We did watch quite a bit because they was what was mostly out there. But on Thursday nights, we let in with the Cosby Show. But we always, after the Cosby Show, watched Family Ties. Michael J. Fox was a guy that we really enjoyed. So definitely wanted to see his movie Back to the Future. And I specifically remember that opening scene with all the clocks, or one of the opening scenes with all the clocks, and him hitting the note on the guitar and being blown away by the gigantic speaker there. So this was a lot of fun to see in the theaters back in the day. And I've seen this movie, I don't know how many times since. It was a long gap where I didn't see it, and then I watched it. I bought it when I was back on DVD. I bought it, watched them, and remember just how great the whole franchise is, and showed them to my kids, and my youngest daughter really took to it. It's maybe her favorite movie of all time. So I definitely always enjoy Back to the Future. That gets my number five spot. Number four is a movie, and one of those I saw too young kind of movies, and this one was one I just saw on late night cable one night when I was visiting my grandparents for the summer in North Carolina. I used to stay up late and watch movies all night, and during one month they were showing this particular movie. There was like three different versions of it they were showing like the 180-minute version, the 125 or something minute version. I have to look that one up. And then there was this version, the 220 something minute version, and I loved all of them, but especially this longest one, and that is Once Upon a Time in America. So I take that back, what I said about De Niro, me only being familiar with him from Raging Bull. I was familiar with him from when Untouchables came out. I was familiar with him from Raging Bull and Once Upon a Time in America. And at that time, it was just that whole gangster thing. You just, as a kid, it's so easy to get caught up in watching it. And then as I got older and rewatched it, it's like, man, this is some fantastic storytelling, even though this movie is, it's getting close to 4 hours long. And it still just keeps me just hooked in. But if you want to watch it, if you've never seen it, you definitely have to plan a day around it. So one of those days when you get ready to binge watch 18 episodes of something else, just go, you know what? Let's try Once Upon a Time in America. I think if you're into crime movies, I think you'll be very, very happy, very satisfied. My top three movies in the 80s were actually set in stone. So everything else from 4 to 25, pretty interchangeable. I could have moved them up. I could have moved them down. I could have moved them out and put in a few other movies. But my top three were set in stone. And we'll start with number three. It is my favorite Christmas movie of all time, and that is A Christmas Story. I saw this way back when, when it, not long after it came out, it hit TV, and I saw it on TV way back then, and just fell in love with Ralphie, fell in love with his whole quest to get the Red Ryder BB gun and his family. And I've seen this 50 times, I'm sure. And as I started having kids, I've watched it even more when I started having kids, and I watched it every Christmas just about. I may have missed one or two, but just about every Christmas I watch A Christmas Story. And since I've had kids, for sure, and my son, my oldest, he just turned 26, so yeah, that's at least 24 times. Like I said, I might have missed a year or two here. it's just a movie that's close to me, and it always will be. So that gets my number 3. Number 2, I actually went to the theaters to see. It was a rated R movie, and I was really technically too young. I was about 16 when it came out. But when we went, it was not my mom with us. It was just me, my best friend, my younger brother, one of my younger brothers, and his younger brother. He only had one. And we watched this movie and cracked up from beginning to end because we were big fans of the star from Saturday Night Live and 48 Hours and Beverly Hills Cop and Eddie Murphy Delirious. We were big fans of all that stuff, so we had to go see Coming to America. And right now, this is my favorite comedy of all time. There's just no doubt about it. So I had to have it here in the top. Like I said, set in stone. Eddie Murphy, so good in this movie. Arsenio Hall, almost as good in this movie. And the situations, the characters, everything was relatable. And it was set in Queens, which is where I actually grew up. And so all of that combines to get it to be my number 2. And then my number 1 is a movie that was set in Brooklyn, not far from where I grew up, and a place I spent a lot of time with my best friend. He lived in Brooklyn. He grew up in Queens for a while, and then he moved out to Brooklyn, so I spent a lot of time out there. And you may have heard me say before, it's my favorite movie of all time. It's usually back here behind this guy, right behind the Blockbuster set. If you've watched any of my other videos, the Blockbuster Sign, and that is Do the Right Thing. And I've said it before, it's a movie that I can relate to on every level. Every person in the movie just feels like somebody that I know or I've met and come into contact with, either had a conversation with or had to do a transaction with. Every person, and that includes the main characters and the side players, or the secondary characters. You know, we're talking the Puerto Rican guys on the stoop over there with the radio battles. We're talking about Radio Raheem, the 3 old men sitting in front of the bodega, the Asian store owner, the police officers, the pizza owner, Sal and his sons. Every one of those people, it feels like somebody that I met in my life. And then we add in the story and how powerful it is on top of that. So Do the Right Thing just easily gets my number 1 spot. Like I said, those top 3 set in stone. Everything else interchangeable, so you can complain all you want. How could you have Die Hard down here, and how could you have RoboCop here, and how could you have this one ahead of that one? Yeah, it's all interchangeable to me. They're all fantastic movies, and I've probably got 25 more movies that I could have put in. And here's what I'm going to do. So stick around for a minute or two. I'm going to go ahead and show some of the movies that didn't quite make the list. I'd rather do that than start naming them, because inevitably I'm just going to forget movies, and I still may do it that way, but it's a lot easier for me to go, okay, I remember this one because I can go back and put it in. So check out my honorable mentions. Let me know what your top 25 movies of the 80s are. If you're not a blue tuber, if you just want to chime in and join the list, because what Tim does is he takes these lists and he makes a grand community list at the end. And so go ahead and put yours down there if you don't want to make a video. If you do want to make a video, please do that. Tag Tim in it. Tag me if you want to, and I'll get it to Tim if you want to do it that way. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to what we all come up with as a community. That's all I have for you guys on this one. I'll catch you on the next one. Check out those honorable mentions for me first, though. Bye.